The evening rain painted the streets of downtown Los Angeles with reflections of neon signs and traffic lights. It wasn't heavy enough to keep people indoors, but just enough to make the city shine with that special glow that photographers and filmmakers loved. Among the many souls seeking shelter from the drizzle was a man in his late 50s, walking with his shoulders slightly hunched, his dark hair damp and clinging to his forehead. He wore faded jeans, worn-out boots, and a simple black jacket that had seen better days. His beard was scruffy, not in the fashionable way that graced magazine covers, but in the way that suggested he simply hadn't bothered to shave for a few days. To most passers-by, he looked like any other regular guy trying to get somewhere dry. Few would guess that beneath this ordinary appearance was one of Hollywood's most beloved actors, whose films had grossed billions worldwide. Keanu had been shooting all day for his latest project. After wrapping up, instead of heading straight to his hotel in the studio's provided car service, he had chosen to walk. He enjoyed these moments of anonymity, these stolen minutes of being just another face in the crowd. It grounded him in ways that the flashing cameras and adoring fans couldn't. About 10 blocks from the studio, the rain started picking up. Keanu spotted a small restaurant across the street, a place called the Maple Leaf. It wasn't fancy by any means, but the warm yellow light spilling from its windows looked inviting. He checked his watch. It was almost 9 p.m. and he hadn't eaten since lunch. His stomach made its needs known with a gentle rumble. The restaurant looked half empty. Perfect. He could have a quiet meal, maybe read through some script notes on his phone, and then call for a ride back to his hotel. He crossed the street, pulled open the door, and stepped inside, greeted by the comforting smell of home-cooked food and the gentle hum of conversation. A young hostess was arranging menus at her station and didn't immediately notice him. Keanu took this moment to survey the place. It was a family-style restaurant with wooden tables, cushioned booths along the walls, and black and white photographs of old Toronto decorating the walls. He smiled to himself, a little piece of home here in LA. "Hi there. Welcome to the Maple Leaf," the hostess said when she finally looked up. If she recognized him, she didn't show it. "Just one tonight?" Keanu nodded. "Yes, please. Somewhere quiet if possible." "Of course," she said, grabbing a menu. "Follow me." She led him to a corner booth partially obscured by a decorative wooden partition. It was perfect. He could see most of the restaurant, but wasn't immediately visible to everyone who walked in. Keanu thanked her and settled in, removing his damp jacket and placing it beside him. "Your server will be with you shortly," the hostess said with a warm smile before returning to her station. Keanu picked up the menu and started browsing. The restaurant specialized in Canadian comfort food: poutine, butter tarts, Montreal smoked meat sandwiches, and various maple-infused dishes. It made him think of his early days in Toronto, long before he became known worldwide for his roles in Speed, The Matrix, and John Wick. He was so absorbed in the menu and his memories that he didn't notice the approaching waiter until a voice broke through his thoughts. "What can I get you to drink?" The voice was flat, almost bored. Keanu looked up to see a man in his mid-30s with a name tag that read Rick. The waiter was staring not at Keanu's face, but at his worn-out clothes and messy appearance. "Just water for now, please," Keanu replied with a polite smile. The waiter gave a barely perceptible nod and walked away without another word. Keanu returned to the menu, deciding on the Montreal smoked meat sandwich with a side of poutine. It had been too long since he'd had proper Canadian comfort food. When Rick returned with the water, his demeanor hadn't improved. He placed the glass on the table with a little more force than necessary, causing some water to splash onto the table. "Ready to order?" Rick asked, still not making eye contact, his pen hovering over his notepad with impatience. "Yes. I'll have the Montreal smoked meat sandwich and a side of poutine, please," Keanu said, maintaining his gentle tone despite the waiter's rudeness. Rick scribbled down the order, then hesitated, finally looking at Keanu properly for the first time. There was a flicker of something, perhaps recognition in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared, replaced by a scowl. "That'll be a while. Kitchen's backed up," he said curtly, though Keanu could see that the restaurant was far from busy. "No problem. I'm not in a rush," Keanu replied. As Rick walked away, Keanu noticed a slight commotion at the front of the restaurant. A woman in her early 60s had entered, shaking raindrops from her umbrella. She had silver hair cut in a stylish bob and wore a simple but elegant black dress. Several staff members immediately went to greet her, their body language showing clear respect and perhaps a touch of nervousness. The woman, clearly someone important to the establishment, smiled warmly at the staff, engaging briefly with each person. She then started making her way through the restaurant, stopping at tables to chat with customers, many of whom seemed delighted by her attention. Keanu watched this with interest while sipping his water. There was something familiar about the woman, but he couldn't quite place her. Perhaps she was the owner or manager? His thoughts were interrupted when Rick returned, practically dropping a basket of bread on the table. "Kitchen says it'll be at least 30 minutes, he said with a hint of satisfaction, as if he was hoping this news might drive Keanu away. "That's fine," Keanu said, reaching for a piece of bread. "This looks good." Rick hovered for a moment, then said in a low voice, "Look, no offense, but we usually cater to a certain clientele here. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at the diner down the street." Keanu paused, bread halfway to his mouth. He wasn't a stranger to rudeness, even with his fame, or perhaps because of it, but this was unusually direct. "Is there a problem with my order?" Keanu asked calmly. Rick shifted uncomfortably. "No, it's just, we don't usually serve your kind here. People might get the wrong idea about our establishment." The words hung in the air between them. Keanu placed the bread back in the basket, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. He'd encountered prejudice before, people judging him based on appearance rather than character. "It never stopped being disappointing, I see," he said quietly. "And what kind would that be exactly?" Before Rick could answer, the silver-haired woman appeared beside their table. Up close, Keanu realized why she had seemed familiar. She was Elena Markova, a renowned restaurateur who owned several high-end establishments across North America. They had met briefly at a charity event years ago. "Is everything all right here?" Elena asked, her voice carrying a slight Eastern European accent. Rick straightened immediately. "Yes, Ms. Markova, I was just explaining to this gentleman that our kitchen is backed up." Elena looked from Rick to Keanu, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. Unlike Rick, she knew exactly who was sitting at the table. "Keanu," she said warmly. "What a wonderful surprise. I had no idea you were in town." Rick's face drained of color. "Elena," Keanu greeted her with genuine warmth, standing to accept her offered hand. "It's been a while. I didn't know this was one of yours." "A recent acquisition," she explained. "I fell in love with this little place last year and made the owner an offer." She turned to Rick, her expression cooling considerably. "Rick, is there something you'd like to explain?" The waiter swallowed hard, looking between Keanu and Elena with growing horror, as the realization of his mistake dawned on him. I didn't recognize," he stammered. Elena's eyes narrowed. "That shouldn't matter, should it? We treat all our guests with respect regardless of who they are or what they're wearing." She turned back to Keanu. "Please accept my sincere apologies for any rudeness you've experienced. Your meal tonight is on the house, of course." Keanu shook his head gently. "That's not necessary, Elena. And really, it's not a big deal." But Elena was already gesturing to another staff member. "Thomas will be your server for the remainder of your meal. And I insist on joining you if you don't mind the company. It's been too long since we've caught up." As Thomas approached with a fresh basket of bread and Elena settled into the seat across from him, Keanu couldn't help but notice Rick being led toward what appeared to be an office at the back of the restaurant. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "You don't need to be too hard on him," Keanu said to Elena, his natural compassion showing through. "We all have bad days." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Kindness is important, yes. But so is accountability. What he did goes against everything I stand for in my restaurants." She picked up a menu, though she surely knew it by heart. "Now, let me make sure the kitchen prepares something special for you. And while we wait, you must tell me about your latest project." As they fell into easy conversation, Keanu couldn't help but reflect on the evening's strange turn of events. He had walked in seeking anonymity and a simple meal, only to be reminded of the complicated relationship between perception, identity, and human interaction. It was ironic, really. The waiter had judged him for being someone he wasn't, while failing to recognize who he actually was. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the city streets clean just as this incident had cleared away pretenses and revealed true characters. For Keanu, it was just another reminder of why he valued authenticity above all else, both in himself and in others. The kitchen at the Maple Leaf suddenly sprang to life after Elena discreetly spoke to the chef. What had been a 30-minute wait transformed into an impressive spread arriving at their table within 15 minutes. Thomas, their new server, moved with the precision of someone who knew exactly how important this particular customer was, not just because of his fame, but because of Elena's obvious respect for him. "I hope you don't mind, but I asked Chef David to prepare a few house specialties," Elena said as Thomas carefully arranged several plates on their table. "He's from Vancouver and has been desperate to cook for a fellow Canadian." Keanu's eyes widened at the feast before him. Besides his ordered Montreal smoked meat sandwich and poutine, there was a plate of butter tarts, a small cedar plank salmon, and something that looked suspiciously like Nanaimo bars, his childhood favorite. "This is too much," he said. Though his smile betrayed his pleasure at the thoughtfulness, Elena waved away his protest. "Please, after what happened earlier, this is the least we can do." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "I want to apologize again for Rick's behavior. He's actually been with us since we acquired the place 6 months ago. Never had a complaint before." Keanu took a bite of the poutine, closing his eyes briefly to savor the perfect combination of fries, cheese curds, and gravy. "This is amazing," he said, deliberately changing the subject. "Tastes like home." Elena smiled, recognizing his gentle deflection. It was exactly what she'd heard about him, always shifting attention away from others' mistakes. Never one to hold grudges or demand special treatment. "So," she said, pouring herself a glass of water, "what brings you to this part of town? We're a bit off the beaten path for celebrities." "Just finished shooting nearby and wanted to walk for a while," Keanu replied. "Sometimes it's nice to just be normal." Elena nodded in understanding. "Anonymity can be a luxury when everyone knows your face." She paused, watching him enjoy the food. "I remember when we met at that fundraiser for children's hospitals. You spoke about your sister's battle with leukemia. That stuck with me." Keanu's expression softened. "Kim's doing well now. She's actually the reason I was in this neighborhood. She's designing a new treatment center a few blocks from here. I was checking out the location before heading back to my hotel." "That's wonderful," Elena said sincerely. "Family is everything, isn't it?" Speaking of which, she was interrupted by her phone buzzing. She glanced at it and sighed. "I'm sorry, I need to take this. It's my daughter." As Elena stepped away to take the call, Keanu continued eating, his attention drifting to the restaurant around him. Despite the earlier unpleasantness, there was something comforting about this place. The photographs of Toronto on the walls, the maple leaf motif subtly incorporated into the decor, the familiar smells of Canadian comfort food, it all reminded him of simpler times. His gaze fell on a particular photograph near the entrance, an old black and white image of a small diner with a sign that read, "Moretti's." Something about it tugged at his memory, but he couldn't quite place it. When Elena returned, she noticed his interest in the photograph. "That was the original restaurant that stood on this spot back in the 1960s, she explained. "The previous owner kept it as a tribute. Apparently it was quite famous in its day." Keanu continued staring at the photo, a strange feeling washing over him. "Moretti's," he murmured. "My mother mentioned that place. She used to work there as a waitress when she first came to LA, before moving to Toronto. She met my father around that time." Elena's eyes widened with interest. "Really, what a coincidence." "Maybe not entirely," Keanu said thoughtfully. "I think that might be why I felt drawn to walk this way tonight. Mom used to describe this neighborhood when I was a kid. I must have stored those memories somewhere deep down." Their conversation was interrupted when Thomas approached with a concerned expression. "Ms. Markova, I hate to disturb you, but there's a situation in your office with Rick. He's quite upset and insisting on speaking to you both." Elena frowned. "Tell him this is neither the time nor place. Mr. Reeves is enjoying his meal." Keanu set down his fork. "Actually, I don't mind talking to him." Elena looked surprised. "Are you sure? You don't owe him anything after how he treated you." "I know," Keanu said with a small shrug, "but maybe it's worth hearing what he has to say." Elena studied him for a moment, then nodded to Thomas. "Please show Rick over, but make it clear that this is Mr. Reeves's choice, not his right." As Thomas left, Elena shook her head in amazement. "Your reputation for kindness isn't exaggerated, is it?" Keanu looked slightly embarrassed. "It's not about kindness. Sometimes people just need to be heard. A few minutes later, Rick appeared beside their table. His earlier arrogance completely vanished. His eyes were red-rimmed and he kept fidgeting with his hands. "Mr. Reeves, Ms. Markova," he began, his voice unsteady. "I came to apologize properly and to explain, though there's no real excuse for my behavior." Elena gestured for him to continue, her expression stern but not unkind. Rick swallowed hard. "My brother was evicted last week. He's been living on the streets while I try to find him a place to stay. When you came in," he looked at Keanu. "Dressed like that, I thought. I made assumptions about you being homeless, and I reacted badly because of what my brother is going through. I was angry at the world and I took it out on you. It was unprofessional and wrong." Keanu listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When Rick finished, an uncomfortable silence hung in the air. "Thank you for explaining," Keanu finally said. "I understand making assumptions. We all do it." He paused, then added, "But Elena's right, it shouldn't matter what someone looks like or what their situation is." "Everyone deserves respect," Rick nodded miserably. "I know. I've never done anything like this before. I'm not asking to keep my job, I know I've messed up. I just wanted you both to know I'm truly sorry." Elena exchanged a glance with Keanu, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Rick," she said firmly, "what you did tonight goes against everything I stand for in my restaurants. However," she sighed, "I believe in second chances when someone shows genuine remorse. You're not fired, but you're on probation, and I want you to work with our community outreach program that serves meals at the shelter downtown." Rick's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? Thank you, Ms. Markova. I promise I won't let you down." "Don't thank me," Elena said, nodding toward Keanu. "Mr. Reeves is the one giving you a second chance here." Rick turned to Keanu, clearly struggling to find adequate words. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Keanu replied. "But maybe you could tell me more about your brother's situation before you go? I might know some people who could help." 20 minutes later, Rick left their table with renewed hope and Keanu's personal contact information. Elena watched him walk back toward the kitchen, shaking her head in amazement. "You just gave him the contact for your foundation that helps homeless people get back on their feet," she said. "After how he treated you." Keanu shrugged, taking another bite of his now cold poutine. Everyone has bad days, and his brother needs help. Elena leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You know, when we met at that fundraiser years ago, I thought your whole nice guy persona might be just that. A persona. Hollywood is full of carefully crafted images that have nothing to do with reality." "And now?" Keanu asked with a hint of amusement. "Now I think the rumors actually undersell it," she replied with a smile. "No wonder you've survived in this industry for so long without becoming cynical." Keanu shifted uncomfortably at the praise. "Speaking of this industry," he said, clearly changing the subject, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you. That photo of Moretti's got me thinking." Elena raised an eyebrow, curious. "Yes? How would you feel about a business partner for the Maple Leaf?" he asked. "I've been looking to invest in something meaningful, and a place that connects to my mother's past seems right somehow." Elena's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you serious? You want to invest in this restaurant?" "After what happened tonight." "Because of what happened tonight," Keanu corrected her. "This place has good bones, good food, and with your expertise running it, I think it could be something special. A little piece of Canada here in LA, where everyone is welcome regardless of appearances." Elena considered him for a long moment. "You're full of surprises, aren't you, Keanu Reeves?" He smiled, that familiar, gentle smile that millions had seen on screen. "Just trying to put something good into the world. So what do you think? Partners?" As rain continued to fall outside, painting the windows with streaks of light from passing cars, Elena reached across the table to shake his hand. "Partners," she agreed. "Though I have to warn you, this means you'll have to come by more often. For quality control, of course." Keanu's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "I think I can manage that. Starting with finishing these Nanaimo bars. They're almost as good as my grandmother's." "Almost?" Elena asked with mock offense. Keanu laughed, a genuine warm sound that filled their corner of the restaurant. "Some things are sacred, Elena. My grandmother's Nanaimo bars are one of them." Neither of them could have guessed how this chance encounter would transform not just the maple leaf, but the entire neighborhood in the months to come. 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. What had begun as a chance encounter on a rainy evening had blossomed into something neither Keanu nor Elena could have predicted. The maple leaf was undergoing a transformation, not into something flashy or pretentious, but into a place with soul and purpose. On a bright Tuesday morning, Keanu arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual. He had just returned from a 2-week shoot in Europe and wanted to check on the progress of the renovations before the lunch crowd arrived. The place was closed until noon, giving the workers time to finish installing the new wooden floors and hanging the expanded collection of photographs on the walls. He used his key to let himself in through the back entrance, nodding to the construction crew who barely looked up from their work. Most of them had gotten used to seeing him around and no longer did double takes when Hollywood's beloved action star showed up in work boots and a dust mask to help move furniture or hang pictures. "You're back," Elena's voice called from the office. She emerged with a stack of papers, her silver bob now sporting a streak of blue that somehow made her look even more distinguished. "How was Prague?" "Cold," Keanu replied with a smile, giving her a quick hug. "The shoot went well, though. We wrapped 2 days early. And you came straight here instead of going home to sleep?" Elena shook her head, but her expression was fond. "Some things never change," Keanu shrugged. "Wanted to see how things were going." "The floors look great." "They should, they cost enough," Elena said, but there was no real complaint in her voice. "Come see the new photographs we found. You won't believe it." She led him to a wall near the entrance where several new black and white photographs had been mounted. They were all of Moretti's, the original restaurant, from various angles and time periods. But one in particular caught Keanu's eye. It showed the interior of the diner in what appeared to be the late 1960s. Behind the counter stood a young man with a proud smile, and beside him a beautiful young woman with a striking resemblance to... "Is that?" Keanu leaned closer, his heart suddenly beating faster. "Your mother," Elena confirmed softly. "We think so anyway. The date matches when she would have worked here. The previous owner's family had these in storage and only brought them out when they heard about our interest in the history of the place. I wanted to surprise you." Keanu stood transfixed, staring at the young woman's face. She couldn't have been more than 20 in the photograph, with the same gentle eyes he remembered from his childhood, though with a youthful spark that time had softened. He reached out, his fingers hovering just above the glass. "She never told me there were photographs," he murmured. "She talked about this place, but I always thought..." He trailed off, lost in memories. Elena placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "There's more. The man beside her is Antonio Moretti, the original owner. His grandson is the one who brought us these photos. He asked if he could meet you sometime. Apparently his grandfather spoke very highly of your mother." Keanu nodded, still unable to take his eyes off the photograph. "I'd like that," he said quietly. Their moment of reflection was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Elena frowned. They weren't supposed to be open yet, but her expression cleared when she saw who it was. Rick entered, followed by a man who bore a strong resemblance to him, though with a thinner frame and more weathered face. Both men stopped short when they saw Keanu. "Mr. Reeves," Rick said, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't know you were back in town." "Just got in this morning," Keanu replied, turning from the photographs. "You must be Michael," he added, extending his hand to Rick's brother. The man looked surprised but took the offered hand. "Yes, sir. Rick told me you were helping with the program, but I didn't expect to meet you in person." Keanu shrugged. "I like to check in when I can." He glanced at Rick. "How's it going at the shelter program?" Something like pride crossed Rick's face. "Really well, actually. We've served over 2,000 meals in the past 3 months, and Michael's been helping for the past few weeks." Michael nodded. "After getting back on my feet, it felt right to give something back." He hesitated, then added, "That apartment lead you gave Rick. It made all the difference. The landlord's a good guy, didn't even blink at my situation once your foundation vouched for me." Keanu smiled, clearly pleased but uncomfortable with the gratitude. Glad it worked out. Elena, sensing Keanu's discomfort with praise, smoothly changed the subject. "Rick, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to talk to you about the new community table concept. And Michael, we could use your input too, since you've seen both sides of the issue." As Elena led the brothers to a corner table where blueprints were spread out, Keanu returned his attention to the photographs, particularly the one of his mother. There was something about seeing her there, young and full of possibility, that felt like a sign. His decision to invest in this place had been impulsive by his standards, but now it felt like something more, like completing a circle his mother had begun decades ago. By the time the lunch service began, the place was buzzing with energy. The renovations weren't complete, but they'd kept the restaurant open with limited seating during the transformation. What had once been a fairly standard, somewhat forgettable establishment was slowly taking on a new identity. Part Canadian comfort food destination, part community gathering space. Keanu sat at the counter, watching as customers filled the available tables. The staff moved with new purpose, and he noticed that Elena had implemented his suggestion of hiring from the very shelter program where Rick now volunteered. Two of the new servers had recently gotten back on their feet after periods of homelessness, and their gratitude translated into a warmth of service that couldn't be taught. "Quite a change from 3 months ago, isn't it?" a voice asked. Keanu turned to find Thomas, the server from his first visit, now promoted to floor manager. "It's getting there," Keanu agreed. "The food smells amazing. Chef's trying out some new recipes today. Fusion dishes that blend Canadian classics with local LA flavors. He's calling it North Meets West." Thomas grinned. "Sounds cheesy, but the food's incredible." As if on cue, a plate appeared in front of Keanu. Poutine, but with a twist. Instead of traditional gravy, it featured a rich mole sauce, and alongside the cheese curds were small pieces of perfectly grilled cactus paddle. "Chef's compliments," Thomas said. "He's been dying for you to try this one." Keanu took a bite and nodded appreciatively. "Tell him it's a hit." As the lunch rush continued, Keanu moved from his spot at the counter to help out where needed, refilling water glasses, clearing tables, chatting with customers who did double takes when they realized who was serving them. He had insisted from the beginning that his involvement not be publicized as a marketing gimmick. He wanted the restaurant to succeed on its own merits, not because of his celebrity. Late in the afternoon, as the lunch crowd thinned, Elena found him arranging chairs at a newly installed community table, a long, rustic wooden piece designed for communal dining, you know. "Most celebrity investors just write checks and show up for photo ops," she teased. "They don't usually help with the actual work." Keanu straightened up, brushing dust from his hands. "Never been much for photo ops," he said with a half smile. Elena nodded toward the front window where a small group of paparazzi had gathered. Someone had evidently tipped them off about his presence. Speaking of which, Keanu sighed. "Was hoping to avoid that today." "Go out the back," Elena suggested. "I'll have someone bring your car around." But Keanu shook his head, looking thoughtful. "Actually, maybe it's time to let the word out at least a little. Not about me, but about what we're trying to do here." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You sure? You were pretty adamant about staying in the background." "I still don't want this place to be about me," Keanu clarified. "But the community programs, the hiring initiatives, the history of the place, that's worth talking about. If my name being attached helps spread the word and gets more people involved, maybe that's not such a bad thing." Elena studied him for a moment, then nodded. "What changed your mind?" Keanu's eyes drifted to the photograph of his mother. "Seeing her there, it reminded me that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves. My mom worked here because it was a place that gave people chances when they needed them. If we can continue that legacy and amplify it, that matters more than my privacy." Elena smiled, understanding in her eyes. "Well then, partner, let's give them something to talk about. But we do it on our terms." As they walked toward the front of the restaurant, Keanu paused by the table where Rick and Michael were still discussing plans with another volunteer from the shelter program. "Everything good here?" he asked. Rick looked up with a smile that would have been unimaginable 3 months ago when he had tried to turn Keanu away. "Better than good, Mr. Reeves. We're planning something big. Outside, the cameras were waiting." But for once, Keanu didn't mind. Some stories were worth sharing, even if it meant stepping into the spotlight he so often avoided. This wasn't about him anyway. It was about continuing a legacy that had begun long before he was born. In the very spot where he now stood, 6 months after Keanu's chance encounter with the maple leaf, the restaurant had become something of a local phenomenon. The careful press coverage, focusing on the community initiatives rather than celebrity ownership, had struck the perfect balance. They were busy enough to thrive, but not so overrun with celebrity hunters that they lost their neighborhood feel. On a foggy Sunday morning, Keanu sat at a corner table with an elderly man whose eyes crinkled when he smiled in a way that seemed vaguely familiar. "So that's how Antonio met your mother," Paolo Moretti said, sliding another photograph across the table. "She came in looking for work, soaking wet from the rain, much like you did that night. And my grandfather said he knew instantly she was special. Said she had honest eyes." Keanu studied the photograph. It showed his mother and Antonio Moretti at what appeared to be a staff Christmas party. Paper decorations hanging from the ceiling and everyone wearing paper crowns from Christmas crackers. "She never told me much about this time in her life," Keanu said quietly. "Just fragments here and there. Said it was where she learned the value of hard work and treating people with kindness." Paolo nodded. "Grandfather ran this place with heart. In those days, this neighborhood was full of people just trying to get by. Immigrants, artists, people down on their luck. He fed everyone, whether they could pay or not." The old man's eyes twinkled. "Sound familiar?" Keanu smiled. Perhaps his investment in the Maple Leaf wasn't as random as he'd initially thought. Perhaps some things ran in the blood. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the front door. Elena hurried in, looking uncharacteristically flustered, followed by Rick and Chef David. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, nodding respectfully to Paolo before turning to Keanu. "We have a situation." Paolo stood up, gathering his photographs. "I should go anyway. My granddaughter will be waiting for me." He clasped Keanu's hand firmly. "Thank you for preserving a piece of my family's legacy. Antonio would have been proud to see what you've done with this place." After Paolo left, Elena sank into the now vacant chair. "The building's been sold," she said without preamble. "What?" Keanu frowned. "I thought the owner was committed to keeping us as tenants. We just signed the 5-year lease extension last month." Chef David shook his head. "Apparently he got an offer he couldn't refuse. Some developer wants to tear down this whole block and build luxury apartments. We got this by certified mail this morning," Rick added, sliding an official-looking document across the table. "They're invoking some clause about redevelopment. We have 90 days to vacate." Keanu scanned the document, his expression growing more serious with each paragraph. "This can't be right. There are protections for established businesses." Elena sighed. "Not enough when the money is this big. The developer's offering to buy out our lease." But she gestured around at the restaurant, now filled with photographs chronicling not just the history of Moretti's and the Maple Leaf, but also the community they'd built over the past 6 months. The walls displayed pictures of their first community dinner, the shelter volunteer program, the job training initiative they'd started. "How do you put a price on this?" Keanu sat back thinking. The restaurant had become far more than a business investment to him. It was a living connection to his mother's past, a place where people like Rick and Michael had found second chances, a community hub that served far more than just food. "Who's the developer?" he asked finally. "West Coast Opportunities," Chef David replied. "They've been buying up properties all over this neighborhood. Word is they've got investors from overseas who want to reshape this whole area." Keanu nodded slowly. "I might know someone at West Coast. Let me make a few calls before we panic." As the others returned to their duties trying to maintain a brave face for the Sunday brunch crowd, Keanu stepped outside to make his calls. The fog had lifted, revealing a crystal-clear day, the kind that made Los Angeles shimmer. He looked up and down the street, noticing for the first time how many for-sale signs had appeared in recent months. 3 hours and a dozen phone calls later, Keanu returned to find Elena in the office, surrounded by papers and looking defeated. "Any luck?" she asked without much hope. "Yes and no," Keanu replied, dropping into the chair across from her desk. "I spoke to the CEO of West Coast. He's a reasonable guy, but this project is too far along to stop completely. They've already purchased most of the block." Elena's shoulders slumped. "So that's it then? We take the buyout and try to relocate?" "Not exactly," Keanu said, a hint of something like mischief in his eyes. "I had a different idea. What if, instead of fighting them, we become part of their plan?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" "The development is going to happen whether we like it or not," Keanu explained. "But what if the Maple Leaf became the centerpiece of the new complex rather than a casualty of it?" I pitched the CEO on including a community-focused restaurant in their plans, one with history and purpose. "And he agreed?" Elena asked skeptically. He's interested, Keanu replied, especially when I mentioned that I'd be willing to increase my investment and bring in some additional partners who care about preserving neighborhood character while allowing for growth. Elena studied him. You're talking about buying into the entire development. Keanu shrugged. Part of it, at least. Enough to ensure that what we've built here doesn't disappear. Enough to make sure that when luxury apartments go up, there's also affordable housing in the mix. Enough to guarantee that the spirit of Moretti's and the Maple Leaf continues. That's a much bigger investment than a restaurant, Elena said carefully. It is, Keanu acknowledged. But I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately. About what we leave behind. My mother found something important here all those years ago. So did I that rainy night when Rick tried to turn me away. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rick stood there looking uncertain. Sorry to bother you, but there's someone here asking for both of you. Says it's important. They followed Rick out to the dining area where a well-dressed woman waited, her expression serious but not unfriendly. Ms. Markova, Mr. Reeves, she said, extending her hand. I'm Lin Chen, City Council representative for this district. I understand you've been talking to West Coast Opportunities about their development plans. News travels fast, Elena remarked. Lin smiled thinly. In development circles, yes. Especially when someone like Mr. Reeves gets involved. She glanced around the restaurant. I've been watching what you've done with this place. The community programs, the hiring initiatives. It's exactly the kind of business we need more of, not fewer. We think so too, Keanu said simply. The thing is, Lin continued, this redevelopment isn't just about one block. It's part of a larger vision for this area. Some of that vision is good. We need more housing, better infrastructure. But some of it risks erasing what makes this neighborhood special. She took a deep breath, which is why I'd like to propose a partnership. Over the next hour, as the Sunday afternoon crowd dwindled, Lin outlined her proposal, a community-focused development that would preserve existing businesses like the Maple Leaf while adding needed housing and amenities. The city could offer tax incentives, expedited permits, and other support if the development included certain community benefits. It's not a guarantee, Lin cautioned as she prepared to leave. The developers still have rights and money talks. But if we work together, the city, community businesses like yours, and investors who care about more than just profit, we might be able to create something special. A model for development that doesn't have to destroy what came before. After she left, Keanu and Elena sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of possibility hanging between them. What do you think? Keanu finally asked. Elena looked around at the restaurant, at Rick explaining a menu item to an elderly customer, at Michael proudly showing a new trainee how to operate the espresso machine, at the community table where a writing group had set up for their weekly meeting. I think, she said slowly, that Antonio Moretti and your mother started something important here, and I think we owe it to them, and to everyone who's found a home here since, to fight for it. She turned back to Keanu. Even if that means becoming developers ourselves. Keanu smiled. That gentle expression that had charmed millions on screen but was, in this moment, meant only for this place and these people who had come to mean so much to him. Then I guess we'd better get to work, he said. We've got 90 days to save not just our restaurant, but the soul of this whole neighborhood. Outside, the clear California afternoon was giving way to evening, casting long shadows across the street. But inside the Maple Leaf, something bright was taking shape, a vision of a future that honored the past while creating something new. It wouldn't be easy, and success wasn't guaranteed. But as Keanu had learned throughout his life, the most meaningful journeys rarely were. 1 year to the day after Keanu first walked into the Maple Leaf, the neighborhood was almost unrecognizable, but not in the way many had feared. The grand reopening celebration spilled out from the restaurant onto the newly created community plaza, where string lights twinkled overhead and a local jazz quartet played softly in the corner. Keanu stood back, watching the scene with quiet satisfaction. The past year had been a whirlwind of meetings, negotiations, setbacks, and small victories. There had been moments when the whole project seemed doomed, when the developers dug in their heels, when city bureaucracy threatened to stall progress, when costs spiraled beyond initial projections. But tonight made it all worthwhile. Quite a transformation, a voice said beside him. Lin Chen, the city council representative who had become a crucial ally, handed him a glass of champagne. You know, when I first approached you about this partnership, I thought it was a long shot. Celebrity investments in neighborhoods usually end up being more about publicity than substance. Keanu shrugged, uncomfortable as always with praise. It wasn't just me. Elena was the one who brought everyone together. Don't sell yourself short, Lynn said. Your vision for inclusive development made this possible, and your willingness to put your money where your mouth has convinced others to follow suit. She was right, though Keanu would never admit it. What had begun as a simple desire to save a restaurant had evolved into something much bigger. Instead of fighting the redevelopment, they had transformed it, working with the developers, the city, and community groups to create a mixed-use project that preserved the neighborhood's character while adding needed housing and amenities. The Maple Leaf remained the heart of it all, now expanded to include a community kitchen that doubled as a culinary training center for people getting back on their feet. The luxury apartments still went up, but now they helped subsidize the affordable housing units that made up 30% of the residential space. Small businesses that had been at risk of displacement were offered reduced rent in the new retail spaces. Mr. Reeves, a young woman, approached, her eyes bright with excitement. I just wanted to thank you. The culinary program changed my life. Keanu recognized her as one of the first graduates of their training initiative, now working as a sous chef at a restaurant across town. You did all the hard work, he replied sincerely. How's the new job going? Amazing, she beamed. Chef David's recommendation opened doors I never thought possible for someone like me. She hesitated, then added, My little brother's applying to the program now. After seeing what happened for me, he has hope again. As she walked away, Elena appeared at Keanu's side. Another success story, she noted with satisfaction. We're up to 63 graduates now, 58 employed full-time in the industry. Better than we projected, Keanu nodded. Much better, Elena agreed. Oh, and you should know, that food critic from the Times is here. The one who wrote that nasty review when we first opened. Rick seated him at the community table next to a retired teacher and a young artist. They're all laughing together now. Keanu smiled at the irony. The community table, long, rustic, and designed for strangers to share meals and conversation, had been his idea, inspired by his memory of diners like Moretti's where his mother had worked. It had seemed like a small thing at the time, but it had become one of the Maple Leaf's most distinctive and beloved features. Speaking of Rick, Elena continued, he wanted me to tell you that Michael got the apartment manager position. He'll be overseeing the affordable housing units here in the complex. Full benefits, good salary. That's great news, Keanu said, genuinely pleased. Rick's brother had come a long way from living on the streets, working his way up through their programs with a determination that impressed everyone who met him. As they made their way through the crowd, Keanu was stopped every few steps by well-wishers, restaurant regulars, neighborhood residents, city officials, even a few celebrities who had joined the investment group. He accepted their congratulations graciously but briefly, never one to linger in the spotlight. Near the entrance to the restaurant, a new addition to the wall of photographs drew his attention. It was a before and after display, images of the neighborhood a year ago beside photos of what it had become. The centerpiece was a side-by-side comparison of the Maple Leaf, the somewhat run-down place he'd wandered into on that rainy night, and the vibrant community hub it was now. Below these hung a photograph from the 1960s, his mother and Antonio Moretti, standing proudly in front of the original diner. Alongside, a recent picture of Keanu, Elena, Rick, and Paolo Moretti at the groundbreaking for the new development. It's come full circle, hasn't it? Paolo said, appearing beside Keanu as if summoned by his thoughts. The elderly man's health had declined over the past year, but his eyes were still bright with the same spark Keanu had seen in photographs of his grandfather. It has, Keanu agreed softly. My grandfather believed that a good meal served with kindness could change a life, Paolo said, gazing at the photographs. I think he would be proud to see how far that idea has come. He patted Keanu's arm. Your mother, too. Inside the restaurant, Chef David was presenting the special menu for the evening. Dishes that told the story of the Maple Leaf, from traditional Canadian comfort food to modern fusion creations. At the bar, a signature cocktail had been named the Kindness, a nod to the philosophy that had guided the entire project. As the evening progressed, Elena clinked a glass for attention and began a short speech thanking everyone who had made the project possible. Keanu hung back, content to remain out of the spotlight. His gaze drifted to a corner table where Rick was serving an elderly couple, his manner attentive and warm, a far cry from the dismissive waiter who had tried to turn Keanu away a year ago. When the speeches concluded, Lin Chen pulled Keanu aside. The mayor's office called today. They want to use this project as a model for neighborhood development across the city. They're calling it the Maple Leaf Initiative, development that preserves community character while allowing for growth. Keanu raised an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously like they want publicity. Lin laughed. Of course they do. But they also want results. What you've done here, it's working. People with money are living next door to people without it. Small businesses are thriving alongside new development. The neighborhood has improved without displacing the people who made it special in the first place. She took a sip of her champagne. That's worth replicating, don't you think? Before Keanu could answer, a commotion near the door caught their attention. A man in ragged clothes had entered and was being approached by one of the waitstaff. For a moment, Keanu tensed, remembering his own reception a year earlier. But then he saw that it was Rick who had moved to greet the newcomer. Instead of turning the man away, Rick was welcoming him, guiding him to an empty seat at the community table, introducing him to those already seated there. Looks like Rick has come full circle too, Lin observed. We all have, Keanu replied quietly. As the evening wound down, Keanu found himself back outside, gazing up at the building that had housed Moretti's, then the Maple Leaf, and now this new incarnation that somehow managed to honor both while becoming something entirely new. Elena joined him, following his gaze upward. What are you thinking? She asked. About that night, Keanu said. If Rick hadn't tried to turn me away, if you hadn't been here, if I hadn't decided to walk in the rain, he shook his head, smiling slightly at the chain of coincidences. Fate, Elena suggested. Maybe, Keanu allowed, or maybe just people finding each other at the right time. Above them, the sign for the Maple Leaf glowed warmly in the night, its light spilling onto the sidewalk where once, long ago, a young woman named Patricia had hurried through the rain, seeking shelter and finding work at a little diner called Moretti's, where, years later, her son had followed in her footsteps without even knowing it, drawn by some invisible thread of connection. Inside, the community table was full, strangers becoming friends over good food and conversation, the wealthy and the struggling finding common ground, the past and the future coexisting in delicate balance, and through the windows Keanu could see Rick moving among the tables, serving everyone with the same care and respect, regardless of appearance or circumstance. We don't serve your kind here, he had said that first night, not knowing who Keanu was. Now, a year later, the Maple Leaf served everyone, a living testament to the idea that kindness, like good food, was meant to be shared, and that sometimes the most remarkable transformations begin with a simple act of welcome.